Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and gathered the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He had also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, earth, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts on the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw that all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. This morning, we're starting a sermon series, a whole sermon series, which is going to focus on understanding the larger picture of the Bible. Oftentimes we as Christians are so guilty of looking at one single tree that we lose picture of the forest. What is the big story that God is at work doing in the world? And I want to ask you this morning, if someone walked up to you and said to you, as a non-believer, what's the Bible all about? You're a Christian, right? What's the Bible about? What's the story of the Bible? Give me the Cliff Notes. What's the summary? And do it in 30 seconds. Would you be able to do that? What would you be able to say? Well, I hope in the next 5 weeks, Lord willing, 5 weeks, we'll cover the Bible as a whole in terms of its story. What are its moves? And I hope by the end of it that you'll be able to say the Bible is a story about how God created this world, this very world that we are currently living in. He created it good. And how humans fell into sin, disobeyed against God, and so destruction and sin reigned throughout the earth. And then God initiated his process of redeeming the earth. He called a people, and finally he called himself, his own son, to come and die on the cross to redeem the world and to rise again. And now he sent his church on a mission to tell all the world about the goodness and the restoration that God has brought to all the earth in Jesus. And finally, he's coming again in glory to redeem the earth and finally rule and reign and restore it to its original goodness. That is the story of the Bible, and I hope that was within 30 seconds. I hope that you get a greater sense of the Bible isn't what it sometimes can feel like is a book full with mini stories, like little parables or Aesop's fables, where it just is meant to teach you a principle or an idea. That is not true. The Bible is actually one story in what I call 5 or 6 acts. You may think of it as acts of a play that go along. Well, God is up to something. His book, the Bible, teaches us that story. And so the very first part of that story is here in the beginning, the creation story. And it tells this story in this first chapter. And I look at the creation story and I see a beautiful canvas that God is painting this picture for us. And we can see the work of a great artist, one like never has ever been in the world before or after. And when we take ourselves out of this building today and you walk out into the world, you get to explore the canvas of creation. You get to see things like bees buzzily working and doing their job. You can see trees. You can see all of life around you taking place. Just this last weekend, Cassidy, the boys, and I, we got to spend the night on Lake Whitney. It was hot out there, but we got to experience the joy and the beauty of creation. We got to see the sunset and the painted sky over the lake. We get to see the stars like we don't normally see, even in Stephenville. We live in kind of a rural city, I think, but you can still see the stars brighter out there. You get to see the beauty of creation in a new way. And so I want to say today to us all, and have us all acknowledge that the creation is beautiful, isn't it? We get to see the painted sunrises or the sunsets. We get to see the luscious landscapes. There's beautiful rainforests like maybe we've not seen, beautiful plains. But do you know what exploring creation is really like? It's like exploring or going to, say, like a great art studio and going to see the great magnificent artwork of a great creator. And then having somebody in that art studio ask you, would you like to meet the artist? Yes, I would like to meet the artist. Who is it that has made such a beautiful world? Who is it that has made such a magnificent creation? Of course, even unbelievers love the creation. They see beauty in it. That's why you see all of these natural shows that are so popular, Discovery Channel, BBC productions, where they show you wildlife and all the beauty. Genesis, for us, the first chapter, parts the veil. It shows us that the beauty of the creation only points to the Creator, whose beauty is far greater than that of the creation. In fact, the creation's beauty is just a shallow glimpse of the beauty of the Creator. And who is this Creator? We learned this Creator is not just any old deity. It's Yahweh Elohim. It's the Lord God who created all things. And so we get to see with new wonder this story in creation is an encouragement, or it's an invitation to behold your God. All of creation, behold your God. And that's exactly what Genesis 1 is about. That's the cry, behold your God. Take a look. And does the world know who created the world? Does the world know the Creator? Who is the one who created this world, or how did it come into being? We Christians believe that we do, and it's told to us in the Bible. When you read in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, you read the creation story, you might actually fall into focusing on what I would call the wrong thing. You know, that we might think of Genesis 1 and 2 would be to satisfy all of our deepest curiosities about how God created the world. Curiosities like, how was the world made? How long did it take? And why is it that humans seem to be so much different than the rest of creatures that God created? While we can find some of those cool, interesting things in Genesis 1 and 2, that actually wasn't the main point in which God gave us Genesis 1 and 2. It wasn't to simply satisfy our curiosities about how he did it. It was actually an argument. It's an argumentative piece for the world. In our culture, as an ancient culture, there are competing stories about the true story of the world. How did this world come into being? Who created this world? You see, for the Israelites back in the beginning, they were Abraham's descendants who were stuck as slaves in Egypt. And in their time, there was competing creation narratives. They, under the Egyptians, would have been taught that the world was really under the power of the sun god, Ra. And so when they received this word, I believe probably Moses wrote Genesis, but the story would have been circulated around, that, you learn that the sun was not created until the fourth day. And so, no, Ra is not God, the creator. Of course not. He can't be. He's just another part of the creation, not even the apex of creation, like mankind. You see, Genesis chapter 1 is argumentative. Even the Babylonians had competing creation narratives. And so this creation story goes and flies in the face of those creation stories. In the first century, it was true too, just like it is today. In the first century, they had Roman and Greek gods. You can think of Zeus, the supreme Greek god, or you could think of Jupiter, who was the supreme Roman god. And the Christians in the first century said, no, those are not the God that created all things. You see, the Bible in Genesis 1 is an argument against culture who would say and put before you false stories, false gods they would have you trying to believe. So too, in their day, they had philosophers that were trying to say that there is no God at all. And they were seeking for other ways to explain the existence of all that is. What I'm saying is that Genesis is actually extremely relevant to our lives today. As it was back in the early Israelite days, as it was in the first century in the church, so it is true today. That Genesis doesn't just tell us a fanciful story, it tells us the true story of the world and the one who created it. In our day, in America, this is a primary story that's being put in front of us. a primary story in which it's saying is true. But we as Christians know this is not true. This primary story is teaching us a story called naturalism. It's a story that's fed by so-called science. And I say so-called because much of science is under the auspice of science isn't real science. And I'm not against science at all. In this belief system, they'll say that there is no capital T truth. There isn't a capital T truth. We all just decide truth for ourselves. What seems good to us, that's true. And so you can never say to somebody, that's not right, that's wrong, or this is what you should think about something, because they'll say, that's your truth, that's not my truth. And that is feeding into the story of naturalism, that nobody created the world, that we all just decide for ourselves what's right and wrong. Naturalism will teach that people are not created, that they are merely stardust through zillions of microevolutions would come to be as we know today. People. So by zillions of chance factors, by no power, no supreme deity, by random factors that are governed by the physical laws of this universe. Some would even go so far as to say that our universe is just one universe in the midst of billions of universes in a bubbling cauldron, kind of like a foaming beer of universes, if you will. That's what they say. That's not my words. When we read in the creation story, though, we read a different story, right? Obviously, we read a story about how the world really was created. We hear the phrase repeated over and over again, let there be, let there be. And the let there be of creation speaks not of randomness, but of purpose, of order. The universe and all of visible creation was not randomly coming into being through a process like that. But God purposely created it. There is order and precision in the creation. There was a plan at creation. There was an idea, not some unknown force, but there was a mind in creation. Some others will say things like, and this is contemporary stories, right? This is creation stories, contemporary. You have the naturalists who say that it came out of randomness. Then there's another that will say that there is a God in the universe and that God is in everything. God is in you, God is in me, God is in this here baptismal. He's in this pulpit. God is in everything. It's pantheism. It's the idea that God is in everything. And this, Genesis 1 teaches us that God is not in everything. God is separate from his creation. He is supremely other than his creation. He transcends his created order. So God is not only distinct from his creation, but he's also intimately involved in it. He has a relationship with his creation, we see. He speaks to his creation, and his creation speaks back to him. We see that in Genesis 2. He actually will even dwell with his creation. And this concept emphatically destroys the notion of the pantheist and also the deist, who would say that the world has just come into being by the power of a deity unknown and does not fellowship or communicate with human life. That God is the divine clockmaker, and he winds the clock and then he walks away from his creation. This is not the God of the Bible. That is an impersonal God that's not in relationship with his creation. We read in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 that God is intimately involved in creation and is speaking even to his creation. In our day, we'll have a common movement which has been praised by the Christian church. In part, I agree with. It's the intelligent design movement. And it seeks, in the face of what some would say science, which is trying to get God out of the picture, it tries to put God in the picture. But we have to be aware, even as Christians, that if we accept the God of intelligent design, that we aren't just becoming susceptible to deism, where simply a God who created something but is not involved in our lives. See, we as Christians say that it's not just about believing in God or that God created all things. It's also about having a relationship with God. It's also about a God who wants to know you and wants you to know him too. And we'll get to the next week on why we have a problem knowing God. God created my hands in such a way that I have a hard time turning pages without looking. So when God in Genesis 1, he comes up with another phrase over and over again. He repeats this really important phrase that we've all heard. And God said it was good. God said it was good. When we observe creation, we observe an account that God believes that his created order is good, the way he made it. And what does this mean for you? That God, first of all, he loves his creation. He thinks it's good. He gave mankind dominion over his creation to care for it in the beginning. It is a sadness, and I believe it's a disobedience, than if we, in the beginning, have this purpose, but we abandon it. We are called as God's stewards of creation to be just that, stewards. So we should care about it. We should not be apathetic to the world or disparaging towards those who seek to care for it. We should be about creation care because God loves the world and he created it good. And in fact, the end of the story, spoiler alert, is that he's going to be at work redeeming the world. We should not be in his way. The creation story, we learn about who created. I said it before, but we see the beauty of the Creator in the creation, and that his beauty far eclipses our own, or the creation's beauty. We learn that in the creation, God had specially honored human life, that he made people in his own image, and he gave them his mark. And because God, who is supremely beautiful, gave his image on people, it gave people intrinsic value. It gives them indefinable worth. Because God, as creator, left his mark on humans, human beings are inherently precious. We are inherently valuable. Every person, every shade, every nationality, men and women, boys and girls, young and old, rich and poor, those yet born and those very elderly, they all have indefinable value because they bear the mark of the Creator. Therefore, as Christians, we fight against any story, any narrative, any kind of worldview that would somehow diminish the intrinsic value of human life. We've all been created in God's image, and that gives us that value. Finally, just wrapping up our time this morning, God created and has revealed to us in the creation. When you look at the stars, you can contemplate the vastness of the Creator, because who could create such a vast expanse? When you see beauty, what kind of a creator is this? It reveals the Creator, but only in a veiled way. If you truly want to know the Creator, you can look at creation. But the best way to come to know the Creator is to look at the person and the work of Jesus Christ. In Jesus, the Father is revealed more clearly than in the creation. You see a Father who loves us, who would do anything for us, to save us and to rescue us. It's in Jesus that we see the great Creator's love for his creation. Because God did not just create the world and abandon it to his own devices not even after it rebelled, but he went on a mission to rescue it. So we reveal that God is such a great creator, and we see that more perfectly in Jesus. And if I'm right, if the Bible teaches us the most true story about the world, that God created it, and that the one thing that we cannot ignore is that people were made by God to be in relationship with him. That we are called and meant to be known and to know our Creator. We aren't merely meant to just worship him, although we are to do that. We weren't merely made just to be enjoyed by him, but we were meant to be in communion with him, fellowship. And this will mean, most importantly, I think, for each and every one of us, that if that's why you were made to be in relationship with the Creator, that you will never find happiness. You will never find satisfaction looking for your purpose outside of God. There's the only place where you will ever find happiness. And you know, that's one of the things that the world probably struggles with the most. They search for happiness and purpose and meaning in every different avenue. They will not search for it in the only place it may be found, which is in God. I hope this morning to have communicated well the beginning of the story and why it is actually really important that we know the beginning of the story of the world this morning. And I also hope that you see the many, many applications to this. And I hope that you see that when you come across competing stories, that you identify them, whether it be in your mind or verbally, what they are truly trying to say and why they're not correct. When and if not you hear these multitude of voices, I think you should always refer back to know the true story of the world and how it all began and who created it. Will you join with me in prayer? Father God, you did create the world in the beginning. And Lord, we are amazed to hear about how you created and how you created us, even so important as to create us with your image. Father, I pray that each and every one of us, as we go out into the world, we will engage other stories that compete against the Bible story. I pray that you would continue to draw us back to the true story and help us to lean into it, that we may not be deceived or fall into sin or be overcome by temptation. Help us to, again, lean into the truth of your word and to know you, Jesus. Amen.